Welcome to Supercars in London on this fine morning as I drive my I wish I was driving an Aston Martin. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a beautiful day on the Supercars of London YouTube channel. You join me in my Alfa Romeo Stelvio Quadrifoglio cruising over to Nicholas Mee, an Aston Martin specialist in Hertfordshire. Beautiful settings and surroundings, perfectly capturing the cars they have for sale. And 2 weeks ago, I popped down there and met up with Neil, who I can only describe to be a splendid Aston Martin connoisseur. And inside Nicholas Mee, there were two cars in particular that caught my eye. And I told Neil that when the weather is beautiful and the sun is shining, I'll be back to experience them, because they are absolute icons. For anyone in their early 30s, this Aston Martin might have been the first one you laid your eyes on when you're watching James Bond Die Another Day. Well, as introductions go, this is a pretty spectacular one. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Nicholas Mee, where I'm greeted by the two Aston Martin Vanquish S's that we're going to be taking out on some of these beautiful roads. And inside, it is filled with some of the most eclectic Aston Martins that this company has had in its history. I went to the cinema with my dad and I still remember seeing this Vanquish for the first time, and ever since then that is what has brought the love for Aston Martin in my heart. And I've driven my fair share of modern cars, but never actually experienced the ultimate Vanquish from 2004, 2005, 2006 and up to 2008, I believe. And there are a number of modern classic Aston Martins that I'm still yet to experience, but we're going to start with these beauties right here. So the Gen 1 Aston Martin Vanquish and Vanquish S can arguably be classed as my original dream Aston Martin. I have many childhood memories of seeing these cars parked up on people's driveways, in restaurants in London, and they have always turned my heads, to the point where I keep an eye on them on Auto Trader, which has led me to come down to Nicholas Mee to check these two cars out. The car on the left has been manually converted by Aston Martin Works, whereas the car on the right has got the original flappy paddle gearbox, the one that Jeremy Clarkson completely ridiculed on Top Gear. But I wanted to speak to actual people that knew everything about Aston Martin ownership, and in particular 20-year-old Aston Martin ownership. What's the reliability like? What's the running cost like? And actually, in this day and age, how do these cars stack up in terms of an experience? So today, we're going to find out. So here we go then, in the standard car, which I think is probably the best way to start this journey before going into the Aston Martin Works manual gearbox. Neil, welcome to the channel.
How are we doing?
I'm very excited about this, and instantly I'm firstly impressed with the sound, but also this car rides better than my Alfa Romeo and my R8 combined.
Yeah, I think you know, to accommodate bigger and bigger wheel rims every model year, the compromise has been in tyre sidewalls, and we've got thinner and thinner and thinner sidewalls, and with that comes ride quality. And the Vanquish is probably the last Aston Martin to have that ride quality that they were famous for throughout the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, I'll tell you what is really impressive is there's no rattles, there's no vibrations, there's no noises or creaks in it, any element of the car, whereas I think a car of 20 years old in most circumstances would have, you know, like a slight knock somewhere, or an imperfection. And it feels like this car's just built, I mean, it is built for going London to Monaco and back without real any problems, but you kind of get this perception, especially of the Aston Martin era of 2000 to 2012, 2015, that they're not as reliable and they're a little bit high maintenance and fragile, but I don't get that impression from this car at all.
No, well, I'd say two things on that. Is that There's a saying in the classic car world: buy the first or last of a model.
Okay.
The first because it's the purest, the way that the stylist imagined it to be.
Yeah.
And buy the last because they're the most refined. They've benefited from the years of development and the little tweaks and the little things that manufacturers do to make a car better every single year.
Yeah.
And this being a very late example, benefits from those years of experience on how to build the cars.
It feels quite small from the driver's position.
Yeah, they feel like they're a big car, but when you see them parked in the showroom alongside current generation of cars, the DBS Superleggers, they look tiny in comparison.
I can imagine.
But what you're saying is very relevant. The guy that says, one day I'm going to have one of those cars, that was 20 years ago when they were just starting in work after leaving university or whatever they're up to. 20 years later, they've worked hard, they've had some bonuses, they've made a success of their business, they're now in a position to buy themselves something for the weekend, a treat to themselves. This era of cars is the one that is coming into sharp focus, and the last two Vanquishes I've sold have been to guys in their 40s.
Interesting.
When I was selling them in 2008, it was 55-year-olds because they could afford them when they were the prices they were then. There you go, much better, much better. It's not exactly offensive, that gear change delay.
Not at all.
Aston's made their name in the late 50s and early 60s producing the best GT cars in the world.
Yeah.
Ferrari at the time were building the best sports cars in the world.
Yeah.
And Rolls-Royce were building the best saloon cars in the world.
Yes.
But Aston, their DB4, DB5 and arguably the DB6 were the best in class as GT cars.
Yeah.
And the Vanquish, I think, very much echoes that, in that if you want a car of a more sporting personality, the Lamborghini of its era would have given you that. Or the Ferrari, the 575 and the 550 are more sports car in personality than the Vanquish.
Yeah.
But still very much a GT car.
Yeah. Because you can see that now, even the modern day, with if you're going to compare the DBS Superleggera to the Ferrari Roma.
Yes.
Arguably both front engine, both designed to be GTs, but two very different personalities. DBS a little bit more chilled out.
Yeah.
You can call 900 Newton meters a tall chilled out. But the Roma's a much pointier, poised sports car with a flair of GT. For a standard mode, the car's got some fantastic gear shifts, downshifts and upshift sounds that
it gets addictive.
Yeah.
You find yourself doing 80 miles an hour in 6th gear and you just paddle back to 4th just for the sake of it, just to hear the exhaust pop a couple of times.
I did just notice, I don't know whether the other car had it, but maybe I just wasn't that attentive, probably because I was trying to take on the whole experience, but this headlining here is beautiful.
It is, yeah, the quilted headlining option.
Yeah. It's like an Alcantara, but it's in this sort of light grey. It's the same leather as the other car that we've been in.
This is a slightly lighter Alcantara. The interior colour here, the hides are phantom grey.
Okay.
The other one was obsidian black.
Yeah.
But funny enough, our trim department have done quite a few of these for owners of cars that have got the standard headlining, but they like the look of this one.
Oh, the moment you'd see that, you'd want it instantly.
Yeah, it looks cool.
It is lovely. It's quite a nice gearbox.
Yeah, it's a nice short throw.
Yeah. Definitely feel like I'm thinking a little bit more with this one.
Yeah, yeah.
Which isn't a bad thing. I know you're 5th.
You're 5th, yeah.
So we were just talking about the maintenance, the ownership costs of something like this, because I always perceived it to be a bit of a horror show. But as you were telling me, the Vanquish, other than the parts cost, they are quite a similar car to maintain in something like a DB9.
Yeah.
If they've been well maintained in their life.
Yes, yeah. There's not many Vanquishes that have done anywhere near the type of mileage intervals that the manufacturer anticipated.
Yeah.
And a lot of owners therefore think to themselves, well, I'll just have it serviced every 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And those are the cars there where we can quite accurately predict what we're going to get into when you look through a service book.
Yeah.
We would suggest to an owner of a Gaydon era car, DB9, Rapide, DBS, that keeping one on the road, if buying a good one in the first place, should be around £2,000 a year. That's your annual service,
Pretty good.
plus some wear and tear items from time to time, brake pads, tyres. A Vanquish, I would say that number's more like £2,500 a year.
Oh. Not quite. Tell you one thing, I don't think works for the manual. Maybe this car in general isn't one that you would drive in this particular way, but I almost feel like this manual gearbox is built for the more smooth shifts, so I'm trying to get it as smooth as possible.
Yeah.
Some manual gearboxes you can really drive in anger,
Yeah.
and therefore I would feel probably a little bit more confident pushing on with the paddle shift on the sort of like twistier roads. But then again, like, it's not a car that's a point and shoot Alpine pass kind of car.
No.
But yeah, I kind of...
That's probably just a bit of confidence there.
Yeah.
The more that you drove this car, the more familiar you got with the gear changes, you would start to think less that way.
Yeah.
I'd also say in response, one of the biggest faults of people that I take out in for a road test in a Vanquish on the first occasion is their desire to change gears all the time.
Yeah.
And I do say to them, you've got a huge amount of torque to play with. You can relax. You can be in third gear way longer than you think you can be. Don't feel the necessity to be changing up and down all the time. Let the car do some work.
And I've jumped back in the Alfa Romeo and I've just seen the most beautiful Aston Martin DBS pull up in that direction over there, which I believe is where a lot of the servicing takes place here at Nicholas Mee. But what an amazing experience driving those Vanquishes, and I felt like I became a different person in those cars. It's such an elegant piece of machinery that I kind of felt out of place, just sat there in a hoodie. And now I'm back in the Quadrifoglio, which is a bit of a hooligan's car, but a very, very cool morning and super interesting to get an insight into Aston Martin ownership, what to expect, what to look out for. And those guys have been very, very helpful in my initial discussions with potentially going out and buying an Aston Martin. But I can't seem to shake the Aston Martin DBS from Casino Royale. And whilst the original Vanquish is where my love for Aston Martin started, maybe the DBS is that perfect blend of a bit of modern and a bit of classic. So that's definitely next on my hit list for cars to drive and to experience. But I'd love to get some numbers with finance. I feel like I'm slowly scratching the surface when it comes to maintenance and reliability and what to look out for. But honestly, I cannot believe how competent and easy to drive those cars are, even though they're 20 years old. It's utterly, utterly surprising, actually. It's really surprising. It makes my R8 feel older than it is, even though the R8's a little bit younger, but you get what I'm trying to say. I will leave the video there now that I joined the dual carriageway to get back, and it feels a little bit silly to be doing it in the Alfa Romeo, which actually rides worse than that Aston Martin. So that's saying something about how good that Aston Martin is. But let me know what you think. It is a completely unknown world to me that I am exploring and delving into, and it definitely is something that I do fancy doing this year. Just something a little bit different, going down the nostalgia route and looking at cars that really got me into loving cars. And whilst the Murcielago was my dream car, I've done it. But there are other nostalgic cars out there that I've grown up lusting after, and maybe this is the year to do it. I'll see you soon, guys. Take care. Goodbye.